Speaking of
Yeah.
using terms incorrectly, did you see
Oof.
Dr. Ian Cuttress?
Oh no, what did Dr. Cuttress do?
You might want to check it out. It's on his Twitter 16 hours ago.
It's still there?
It's still there.
Did he do something wrong? Uh-oh.
Um,
All right, all right. I'm checking it out. I'm checking it out. All right, display capture. Here we go.
I can link it to you. I
No,
should
no,
have
I
just
got
linked
it
it to you.
already. I got it. I got it.
Okay, okay.
Okay, the pinned tweet. I'm on YouTube creators. Creator on the rise today. Oh, that's cool.
That is actually pretty cool.
Look at that.
Is he still called like Hut Hut Potato or whatever though?
Tech Potato.
Tech Potato.
Yeah, he
God.
really needs to change that.
Ah,
Please.
come on. Cool, you're trending, but come on.
Oh, wow. As a community, we need to be more accurate when we're talking about DRAM. A kit of DDR4 3600 runs at 3600 mega transfers per second, not megahertz. It actually runs at 1800 megahertz and does 2 transfers per hertz. That's why it's called double data rate, because it does twice as many transfers, once on the rising, once on the falling edge of the signal. Yes, that is true, Dr. Cuttress, but I and unfortunately the entire rest of the industry don't give two flying about that distinction. And so unfortunately, because we've been using it this way for so long, and it's even gone as far as to the point where most motherboard BIOSes denote it this way, we are never, ever, ever going to get that fixed. I'm so sorry. You're not wrong.
He makes an argument below that, saying that because someone's like, I get it, but does it really matter? Blah, 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 blah. Everyone's been using it this way the whole time. He says it does matter. It's accuracy. Yeah, okay, whatever. The world will move to QDR for main memory at some point, and it's better to pivot now than deal with the confusion later. Do you agree? Yes or no?
No, I don't, because for all intents and purposes, QDR will be twice as fast as DDR. And when you're talking to the average consumer or even a fairly educated consumer, what's that?
Nothing.
Oh, even if you're talking to a fairly educated consumer, a lot of the time words are about communicating. The words are about communication, right? So a lot of the time, the way that we communicate to each other is more about making sure that there's clarity and less about making sure that from a pedantic point of view, we are more correct. So if I were to say, okay, Luke, we've got this memory is like balling out of control. It's 8 gigahertz. Or if I was going to say, okay, it's 4 gigahertz QDR instead of 4 gigahertz DDR, which one would you think is faster?
The QDR one?
Okay, yeah, but they're both the same. So I don't even know. Are you trolling me right now?
I was trying to think, like, from a consumer standpoint, I'd be like, oh, but the other thing looks bigger, so maybe more. I can kind of understand his argument here.
I can understand his argument too. It just doesn't matter because, okay, it's like ATM machine. You're not actually, yeah, you're wrong or whatever, right?
Okay, fair.
But it doesn't matter because the communication is very clear. And in this case, if you were to say, instead of, so let's say we end up at, 4 gigahertz DDR, and then all of a sudden there's a QDR changeover, and now we can do 8 gigahertz or, okay, sorry, excuse me. We're at 4 gigatransfers per second versus 8 gigatransfers per second, right? Ultimately, what we're talking about is an actual doubling in effective real world speed. So is it incorrect? Yes. But is it actually misleading anyone? Because I'll get really upset when marketing terms end up misleading the user. In this case, we are actually leading the user to the correct conclusion by using terminology that they are more likely to already understand. And if we want to get, if we want to get sort of really annoying about the way we're making the argument, we could say something along the lines of, okay, well then I wasn't talking about the actual switching frequency of the IC. I was talking about the transfers. So the transfers themselves are running at 8,000 megahertz. Because you are still doing 8,000 mega transfers per second. It is cycling 8,000 times, or a bit is moving 8,000 times per second in either case. So it's just one of those things where it just doesn't matter.
I expect a response from.
I expect a
Dr.
response
Coates.
too, and like I get it. I mean, everyone has their own hill that they die on. You know, I got really upset when the industry started calling LED backlit LCDs LED monitors, because that really is extremely misleading. LED display technology was already something that was a twinkle in the eye of engineers who were working on that technology. And LED display technology is not the same thing as an LED backlight behind an LCD panel. Like, functionally, those are extremely different technologies with extremely different advantages and disadvantages. So now that it's actually coming to fruition, we're ending up calling the actual light emitting diode displays micro LED, because in order to get them small enough to integrate into a display in that way, they do have to be there's just a completely different size class. So they're micro. And then adding to the confusion, we now have mini LED TVs, which use smaller but not as small backlights that are made up of LEDs, but in multiple zones. That is an area where the confusion that will be caused by that nomenclature. If I'm a consumer, I walk into a Best Buy, I'm not going to understand why the micro LED TV costs 4 times as much as the mini LED TV. And if we hadn't started naming TVs by their backlight type instead of by their panel type, we never would have had this problem. That will lead to actual consumer confusion. In this case, it just doesn't matter, because consumers will not be confused, because the terminology is already something they're familiar with. And when that number doubles, it will have a real world doubling effect on performance. So who cares? They're not being misled. It just doesn't affect anything. There, that's my take. He's not technically wrong, but it's irrelevant.
Well, I think they are being misled, but it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't necessarily affect anything.
Exactly. Freuni Gamer says hertz just means per second. There's no unit there, so using hertz for transfer per second is not incorrect. Yeah, I mean, that was the argument I was kind of making before, but I was being a bit facetious, because in information technology, we generally use hertz to describe like a clock cycle.
Yeah.
We don't use it to describe what is being done on that clock cycle, right? So, you know, if we want to start talking about that, well, now we're, you know, in CPU terms, we're talking about IPC, so instructions per clock. So from Ian's point of view, this is kind of akin to AMD or Intel getting it in their head that they can start branding their CPUs by how many instructions on average they can execute per clock. And then, you know, Intel coming out and saying, well, here, hold on a second. What is the, I actually don't know what it is for, because it doesn't matter. I don't know what it is for either Ryzen or 11th gen Intel, but that would be extremely confusing if Intel and AMD were to change that branding and come out overnight and say, hey, we don't have 4 or 5 gigahertz CPUs anymore. Now they run at 20 or 30 gigahertz because we're counting how many instructions they can execute per cycle. So he's right. We don't have consistency right now. I just still don't care.